Hello again, Chris Lee of Southeastern 16, Chase Robinson, my partner at Southeastern 16, ready to talk some SEC football because it's football and it's the South, and you're always here to talk football. We're here to do that with you. Today, we will be hitting specifically Florida, the rebuild, LSU, why this is a big season for Brian Kelly, Alabama's offense. That's a big topic, how they're going to rebuild without a quarterback and all sorts of things, with the new quarterback, who it might be, maybe some new offensive staff. Chase, we got a lot to cover today. We'll take your questions, your super chats, maybe here and there. But I'll let you kick us off. We got a lot to get into today. Where would you like to start?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's just important to say that there's no such thing as an off season in college football, but SEC football. Look, it's never too early to start diving into these teams because there's so much there, and I think 2025 is going to be a great year for the SEC. And look, I know people like to especially the haters of the SEC, those that are tired of seeing the SEC at the top of college football. We're so glad that SEC was not in the national championship. Like, I don't think that's something we should get used to. I think we should continue to expect, and I think we will continue to see SEC football teams contending for national titles. And I think that's going to be because we got some really good teams. Just diving into rosters of some of these teams. I haven't gotten into every single SEC team yet, and looking at the ins and outs of what they have, but I've looked at a lot and just seeing the moves that are being made, the players that are coming in, the players that are staying, that are saying, hey, I'm not going to go to the NFL because I want to come back and play for, X team in 2025. Like, I think there's a lot to be excited about with SEC football in 2025.
Yeah, I think the competitive parity has made the league more interesting than it's been from and that I ever remember, top to bottom. What it has also done is it's taken the top off the league a bit and given Ohio State and Michigan and some Big Ten a little bit of a foothold where they had lost ground. But hey, that's a great football league too. It's been the SEC's run of dominance has been fun, but it's kind of nice when you have some other competition outside that too. So congrats to the Big Ten for what it did. But let's talk LSU, because I think, speaking of powers, Chase, that's a team that has had its day. It's won national titles even not that long ago under Ed Ogeron. Since then, I think Brian Kelly, and boy, what was going through Brian Kelly's head? Seeing Notre Dame get to the national title after all the comments he'd made about LSU being an easier place to win. Well, welcome to the SEC, where every week is grind. I still think Brian Kelly has done a solid job there. I don't think he's done a bad job. If you're not winning national titles every few years, though, you're missing expectations at LSU, which is not necessarily fair. People feel the same way at Georgia, at Alabama, probably at Florida, even if not as recently. And a lot of other schools feel like they need to be in that territory too. But why do you think this is a huge year for Brian Kelly? I think it's probably easier for me to give answers that would make sense, but I want to hear your take on it first.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly is you think to his time at LSU. Okay, he gets in the league. I mean, he beats Alabama. He gets to the SEC championship. In his first year at LSU, and then we see them take a step back. Produced a Heisman Trophy winner, but were just horrible defensively. Couldn't stop anybody. They were improved this past year, but this is the most important year, I think, for Brian Kelly, probably in his coaching career, because I feel like he was pretty safe at Notre Dame. He was consistently winning. He had great players. He was recruiting well. Notre Dame was in a situation being an independent where it's not like you got to win a conference championship every year or be in contention to keep your job. No, he was in a good position there. So I think this is his most important season as a head coach. And I think he's done a good job thus far in the offseason already on the 30th day of January. It hasn't been long that it's been an offseason, but I think he's managed it well in putting together a roster for 2025 that can win him some games and that can keep him out of that conversation of does he belong at LSU? Does he belong in the SEC? And I think specifically defensively, because that is where LSU has had the most problems. Now, this past year, again, it was a step up. They lost Harold Perkins, though. They still were able to, I feel like, defend well even without him. He's coming back. You got Whit Weeks coming back. So those are two guys that Brian Kelly was able to retain. So I think that says a lot right off the bat there of, okay, are they buying into Brian Kelly? I think so. But then he was able to go out and get a couple of guys from Florida. And I think this is crucial for LSU this year, is to put together a good defense. Well, they went and got Jack Pyburn, the edge rusher from Florida, brought him to LSU. That's huge, I think, for the Tigers. They went and got cornerback Jaheim Jackson from Florida and brought him to Baton Rouge. I think that's huge on defense. So Brian Kelly has not worked the portal very aggressively in the past, but he sees that he's got to. He's got to do that. And whether it's spending tons of money on him or not, he was able to go out and get some very quality guys out of the portal. I think that was big, very big for the LSU Tigers. But those two guys specifically, I think, are big. Also, Patrick Payton from Florida State, edge rusher, a huge addition there. So you got two guys on the edge who cause a lot of problems or did at their previous schools, both from Florida, one from Florida State, one from Florida, who I think are great additions. Then you move over to offense, and I think this is where Brian Kelly has done an excellent job of making sure his offense stays on point and stays relative. Of course, Garrett Nussmeier, we saw what he was able to do. I think this is an important offseason for Nussmeier as well to grow a little bit in the starting role, but having him coming back, and then you add Nick Anderson from Oklahoma at wide receiver. Of course, he was injured a lot of the season. Great in 2023, went out in 2024 with the injury. But he's a guy that in 2023, he averaged 458 yards after catch. And so, like, or he had that many yards after he caught the ball. Like, that's big time. So to add him at wide receiver, Barian Brown from Kentucky transferring to LSU. That's another big-time receiver you have there in your room. Bauer Sharp, tight end, comes over from Oklahoma to LSU. That's another great addition of a guy who's had a lot of snaps in college football. And then Michael Van Buren from Mississippi State, the quarterback, he transfers over to LSU. So you have depth in your quarterback room with a good quarterback in Michael Van Buren there. And then you add depth at receiver and add to the guys you already have. So I feel like Brian Kelly has done a masterful job so far, and he may not be done yet, or he may be done. This may be all the guys that get out of the portal. But I think he's done a great job already in the offseason of bringing in quality guys. They may not have brought in, tons and tons of guys out of the portal, but they got really quality guys that are going to help them win games. And that's what Brian Kelly has to do. He can't just field a team to put out there with an LSU jersey on. Brian Kelly has to win games this year, and he's put together a roster so far that I think is going to do that for him.
You know what is really weird is, like, if you'd said 4 years in, how's he built his team and where has it worked? Like, LSU is a place where they have just churned out first-round defensive linemen and corners, and he is a defensive-minded coach. And of course, the Perkins injury really hurt them last year, and that's a boost they get next year that they didn't have this year. So that's a better starting point, everything else equal right there. But I never would have guessed that the way that it works is Brian Kelly's getting all these NFL receivers and quarterbacks, and he's losing 2 first-round tackles, and I get some of that was in place maybe before him. But they're having no problem getting offensive playmakers.
Yep.
And linemen and stuff. But, like, I'm just shocked. And again, I think Brian Kelly's done a good job. I think Brian Kelly is an easy punching bag for a lot of reasons. Some fair, maybe some not. But I wasn't expecting the way that they have built their roster and built their success. I thought that with his defensive background, they would be getting more studs in the trenches, more more first round corners, those kinds of things.
No, yeah, I agree with you on that. Like that, it is, but I think he's realized like this is what it's going to take in this day and age in football to win games. You got to get playmakers and offense.
Yeah.
And I failed to mention a couple offensive linemen who transferred in that I think will be very good. That's Braylon Moore, Virginia Tech, and Josh Thompson of Northwestern. Those two guys were did great at their respective schools, and so like I think they're starting to build the roster like we're talking about for it to go in the right direction. And so I think LSU can win some games. You know, this year I feel like they fooled us a little bit with the start they went out on, and you're like, okay, like Brian Kelly's done it. He's got this team back relevant, back winning the games, and then you saw it kind of fade away there towards the end. You're like, okay, this is kind of what we thought Brian Kelly at LSU is. And so they've got to stay consistent, and that's something I feel like they weren't this year. They couldn't play from behind, and that was the biggest thing to me. If LSU went down, it's like Nussmeier and company just kind of lost it there, and they didn't call the game great when they were behind. They had to play with a lead, and you can't do that in the SEC. You've got to be able to play from behind, and LSU just couldn't do that this year.
Well, and to be fair, they've had some brutal schedules too, Chase. There's some teams that got further than LSU did this year, and I'm not saying they were bad teams, but they had easier paths than what LSU had. And speaking of which, I'm looking at their schedule next year. Holy smokes! Have you taken a look at this?
Lightly.
First of all, I'm not sure why anybody's doing this anymore in the SEC, given the way the committee seeded the playoff this year. I would not be playing Clemson as an opener. I especially would not be playing it at Clemson. That is the draw LSU's got for this coming year. Week 3, Florida. Now, that's in Baton Rouge. We know how that went last year. Week 5, Ole Miss on the road. Week 6, South Carolina in Baton Rouge. Week 7, Vandy in Nashville. Not a pushover anymore. Followed by A&M. That's in Baton Rouge. Alabama, Arkansas. And they close with, Western Kentucky, then Oklahoma. But that middle of that season, man, you get a couple of bad breaks that don't go your way.
Yep.
That's my concern. And I know the conversation is if it doesn't go well, it'll be the next guy. But what is your ceiling? And I know LSU is an elite program, right? This is not a shot at LSU as much as it is, I think, an endorsement of what I think of Brian Kelly. Like, if that goes wrong, where do you go next? Do you go try to get – I mean, the offense, again, hasn't been the problem. I was going to say, do you go get an exciting offensive mind to lead your program, get everybody excited? But, I mean, they've scored points under BK too. So I'm just not – I guess my question is, okay, if you're unhappy with 3 and 4 loss seasons, I get it. We know what the standard is at LSU. We know what the talent is in LSU's backyard. We know LSU has been able to win in spurts as big as anybody. But, like, if Brian Kelly's not the answer, then who is? Where do you go?
Right. Yeah. And that's a $1 million question. You brought up the schedule, and that's a good place to go because, look, LSU needs to win the opener because that's something that Brian Kelly hasn't been able to do. And you got Clemson. It's gonna, I haven't been keeping up with Clemson this offseason, but look, I mean, they're typically a good team. So if you're LSU, you want to win that opener no matter what, because you don't. The past couple of years, your season has been set behind because you lost that opener. Your season could look much different if you could win those and finish those. And so Brian Kelly has not been good in opening season games. He's got a good one again this year with Clemson. So I think it'll be important here to win the opener and set the tone for your season and not have to play from behind again as far as the schedule goes.
Yeah, I'm trying to look. I'm just pulling up top 25s, which are premature. I pulled up ESPN's. I guess if there's a silver lining in this schedule, Texas is number 2 on ESPN's way too early top 25. Georgia is number 5. Neither of those teams on the schedule. Clemson is 7. LSU, by the way, is 8. South Carolina 10. These are teams on the schedule. Alabama 12. And Florida 18. I'm a little surprised Florida's not a bit higher. By the way, we're going to talk them in a minute. Tennessee at 19, not on the schedule. A&M at 22 is on the schedule, correct? Yeah. And then Ole Miss at 25 on the schedule. So that is how many ranked teams according to ESPN? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So half your schedule is teams that are allegedly top 25 teams according to ESPN. Yeah. And by the way, some of those other games, not pushovers either.
Yeah. Donovan says LSU will go after Eli.
Yeah, well, Eli Drinkwitz, I could see that. But I mean,
that'd be interesting.
Okay, let's unpack that a minute, though. I think Eli Drinkwitz has done a terrific job at Missouri. No playoff appearances. Had the schedule laid out for them this year to go.
Yep.
Senior quarterback didn't get there. Why is Eli Drinkwitz a better hire at LSU than Brian Kelly? Just because we're pissed off at Brian Kelly because he didn't get us to the playoff?
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I don't think he has proved himself, like you're saying, in those big situations to take a pressure-packed job.
Yeah,
like LSU is.
And don't get me, I think Eli Drinkwitz has done a really good job at Missouri.
Yeah,
but what he was before that, it was Appalachian State.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want to hit Florida next?
Yeah,
we do have some things in the chat too. If you want to address those, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, we'll get to the chat here in just a minute after we talk a little Florida.
Okay. Now, I think Florida, to see Florida at 18 feels a little low. You've got maybe, arguably, best player in the conference, most talented player in the conference is your quarterback, the momentum. I think after what Billy Napier overcame, and remember how ugly that got before September was over. Remember how bad the Miami game was, the A&M game.
Yep.
Injuries didn't always go their way. And I think I've said this on here before. 2 years ago, when I was just kind of kicking around what's being said in behind the scenes, ADs, SEC talk circles, Florida was a team that everybody was talking about. Is like Napier's going to be the next big thing here. Now, maybe he is, maybe he's not. They lose to Vanderbilt, 2 years ago, and that's when the wheels kind of started to fall off. You don't lose to Vanderbilt in this league if you're Florida and expect things to go well. So I get it. They underachieved, but it was not also the best situation that Dan Mullen left them. You had to mess with their collective. You had all that stuff going on. Sometimes you just need to let a situation calm down a little bit. Everybody take a deep breath. I feel like maybe that reset that we got with a little calm at the end of the year when Florida surprised everybody could be just what they need.
Yeah. I mean, you get momentum to end your season. That's going to help. And it helped recruiting. Like, they landed a top 10 class, which I thought was great for Billy Napier. Obviously, they got a great win in the bowl game over a good Tulane team.
Yeah.
Just a lot of momentum there at the end of the season that Florida really needed to show, hey, like, the Gators are a team to watch. And I firmly believe that in 2025. You got DJ Lagway coming back. I think their running back room is solid. It's deep. You got Jaden Ball, you got Jacoby Jackson, Trayon Webb, and Katie Daniels all in your running back room. That's 4 guys who can tote it pretty good, and so they got depth there, which I think will help. They got 4 starters on the offensive line coming back. Jake Slaughter, I think, is a name to watch there on the line. That's going to cause some problems and do big things. But to have experience on the line, a deep running back room, DJ Lagway, I think is a great combination. Now, there's questions at wide receiver, and I think that's where they've got to put their focus in the offseason, is in that receiver position. But overall, offensively, I think this is a good Florida team that's going to be able to score points. And I think they're going to be solid in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And I think that's what Billy Napier was trying to make happen. Because, I mean, you got to. The game's won in the trenches. And so I think Florida has put themselves in a situation where offensively they've got some playmakers, and defensively they're working to do that as well. I think they've got look, George Gums is great on the edge defensively.
Yeah.
They got 3 defensive line starters coming back, including Gums, and so I think they've got some experience there. And then you add guys in there as well that they're trying to get more depth at linebacker. That's been a focus in the offseason from what I've read and heard. But the fact that they've got guys on the lines on both sides coming back, I think that look, I think Florida's going to be a team we can be excited to watch in 2025. Like, because they've showed us, even if they don't start well, this is the team, and Billy Napier can keep the guys motivated enough to win games late in the season. And I think that's a big positive for him. That players he doesn't lose the locker room. He keeps it. And they proved that this year in 2024.
Yeah, and by the way, same thing can be said of Brian Kelly, since we were just talking about LSU a minute ago. Bowl games I get that they're meaningless and they're kind of crapshoots, but I mean, when you're seeing other teams no-show for bowl games and they are obliterating teams the last few years, that tells me a little something about a coach's ability to keep a locker room and build a culture. So I think that's another thing that I would put in Brian Kelly's column, and it's the same thing for Billy Napier. I mean, again, that we looked at the season, we said we think this is a pretty decent team, but will the schedule crush Florida?
Yeah.
We saw what happened early. They did have some injuries. Jason Marshall Jr. missed some time, and they stayed in the fight. But I'm looking at things, and I'm using using ESPN's too early top 25, their key returning players, and some stuff stands out here. Jake Slaughter, their center, Austin Barber, their left tackle, both back. Maybe your 2 most important positions on the offensive line. We talked about Lagway, Jaden Ball just exploded for some big games late in the year. I don't know if you mentioned Eugene Wilson or not, but he's going to be one of the better receivers in the league.
Yeah.
So I think they've got some pieces on offense here, Chase.
They do, and some explosive pieces. And again, their biggest thing was adding depth this year. And I think they've done that because they learned this year. Florida learned, Oklahoma learned. These teams that really battled injury this year learned you have to have depth and guys who can go out and get the job done, because you're going to need it when you're in the SEC in this league. The physical teams that are here, you have to have depth. You have to have guys who can go out there and get the job done. And it's got to be next man up. And I think Florida is doing that, where their roster is going to be in a position where they can just, hey, next man up. And here we go. And they're cranking them out. They're adding depth, which is huge.
Well, and the other thing is I just looked at where I had questions about them preseason last year was their defense. I just looked at it and I said, they don't have a pass rush other than Jason Marshall Jr., who missed some time. I just didn't think, I mean, it didn't jump off the page like vintage Florida rosters did defensively.
Right.
And I just thought that's a lot to overcome. And they ended up kind of piecing it together. Not a lot of superstars there, but they were a very solid defensive team late in the year, especially after having a lot of trouble stopping the run. And again, to me, that points to something when it feels like it's falling apart, when everybody's calling for your head, when you're not sure if all the pieces are there, to piece it together the way that Billy Napier did and turn it into that.
Yeah,
Hats off to that guy, man. He did a great coaching job a year ago.
he did, and I think Florida fans should be excited about that, watching that, even when, yeah, things weren't going great. They found a way to win games, and I think that again, people should be excited about Florida football. And look, I think they're going to be fun to watch. I really do. Come 2025.
Yeah. Anything else on the Gators? I know we got some comments and questions we'll address at some point. I know Alabama was on the agenda for today for the offense, which is, boy, that's been hard to follow. I know you're down there in Alabama. What are you hearing? What's the vibe around Alabama's offense?
I think the biggest thing right now is there's not a lot of experience at quarterback. You've had Ty Simpson sitting back there, who's gotten some reps. A quarterback coming in, doing some mop up duty. And I think he's a talented quarterback. He's coach's son. Dad coaches college football. He's been around the game for a long time. I think he understands the game. But again, he doesn't have a ton of experience, and he don't have any experience as a starting quarterback. So what does that do for Alabama's offense? Is he going to be the guy? Is DeBoer going to pull something and bring in a guy in the summer to be the starting quarterback? We'll see what they decide to do there. But look, I think they are in good hands with Ty Simpson. But I think another guy to watch is Austin Mack. He transferred to Alabama. DeBoer recruited him to Washington, and he's freshman. He came to Alabama with DeBoer. Just from the things that I hear from the folks who are around that program and cover it very closely, he's a great quarterback, and he's built like a really good quarterback. Great hands. So I think Ty Simpson definitely has maybe a little more experience than him. Neither one of them obviously with starting experience. But I think Austin Mack's the guy who can compete for that starting job. I really do. I believe that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. Look, but I think that you got Jam Miller, you got Richard Young at running back. I think those are two good backs you can rely on. You got Jeremy Bernard. You got Ryan Williams at wide receiver. And then you got Jalen Mbakwe. And I watched Jalen Mbakwe play a lot of high school football. And having covered him, he's from the Birmingham area of Alabama, won a couple state championships for Clay Chalkville High School. And Jalen Mbakwe is a dude. And he is going to be stepping into this receiver position. We saw him some in the bowl game, but getting for him to get more reps this spring and in the summer, I think he's going to be a big part of this receiver room for Alabama. He played on defense and offense in high school. He's played some defense in college, and they kind of tried to put him on the defensive side of the ball as well at Alabama, but they've moved him to receiver, and I think it's a really good move for them to get him at receiver. I think the offensive line is in good shape at Alabama too, and for them to have a consistent offensive line, I think is going to be really good, because that's been a problem too in recent years at Alabama. But you got Caden Proctor, you got Parker Brailsford, you got Wilkin Formby, you got Jaden Roberts, and Cam Dewberry. Those are guys who've played football, who have reps. They've been in the trenches, and I think that's going to be big for Alabama to have these guys back, to have a level of comfortability on the offensive line. I think is going to help a lot, find some consistency for the Crimson Tide this year.
All right, I have a question for you. Give me a realistic comp on Mbakwe. Like, what's it look like if it goes well for him?
I mean, he has the potential to be really, really good. He's built really well. Like I always say, like, because I cover a lot of high school football, and like you can tell when a guy is is going to play at the next level, or
Yeah.
even farther than college. You can tell, and he's one of those guys that when he was on the field, you knew this guy is special. This
Yeah.
guy is good. He's built like it. He's built like a college player, and a pro player. Um, he moves really well. You put the ball in his area and he's going to catch it. I mean, he reminds me like Ryan Williams is on a different level, but I think
Yeah.
Jalen Mbakwe has those characteristics of he is just a playmaker, a game changer. And so I think, look, I think it can go well for him. He's got some great receivers around him in Alabama. And I think they're in a position this year where they're going to be able to spread the ball out a lot. And I feel like they couldn't do that as well last year, spread the ball out to receivers just because they didn't. It was too inconsistent. But I think this year they're going to be able to spread the ball out a little bit more. I think they're going to be more comfortable in the system that DeBoer has in place, and so I think Jalen Mbakwe could be a huge part of that.
Well, the reason I asked, and I'll give you a little background here. I know last year the talk was that Alabama could be back to what it was before.
Yeah.
Going into last year. I looked at the roster and I had questions, man. And you always trust Alabama's ability to recruit and develop players, but I didn't see the Jerry Judys and the Smiths and the, if you want to go back a little further, the Amari Coopers running around the field. I didn't see the Ingrams, the Henrys, those guys in the backfield. I saw guys that had good recruiting rankings, but you see a lot of those guys that never reach the potential. Some do, some don't. I wanted to see what it looked like. And I wanted to see what it looked like with Jalen Milroe. And unfortunately, with Jalen Milroe, when it mattered the most, he didn't deliver up to the potential. Yeah, and to me, but like Ryan Williams was the guy that you looked at on that team last year, Chase, and you're like, that's a dude that looks like the dudes they've had in the past.
Right.
And to me, he was the only one that really fit in that category. I'm not saying those other guys weren't any good, but it wasn't that standard. If you pair him with another guy that can be a difference maker, not just good, but a difference maker, then they're a real headache because you can't cover Williams with two guys as much. It just makes everything else multiply.
Oh yeah,
and that's what that's why I asked the question, because like if he's that level of player, then and the other one I want to let you respond, but I want to have an Austin Mack discussion here too.
Yeah, I mean he let me pull up some numbers on him real quick because he again, we haven't been able to see much of him. But look, he's 6'6", 236, redshirt freshman. He has the potential. Again, we haven't seen him in a college game at Alabama, so all this is potential things. But he has the potential again to be really good because again he's built big.
He's huge.
Like I said, he's 6'6", 236. That's a big guy. Like he and he can run, he can throw. Like he's a dual threat guy, and so that's why I think maybe he fits more into DeBoer's style is because of his build to go along with his ability.
Yeah, and I know some people in that fan base are super excited about him. They think he's going to be a stud.
Yeah,
and if you get an Mbakwe, and if he's all that, and we know what Williams is, the offense, who knows? And I wonder too. I'm not a scheme guy, okay? So I'm the wrong guy to answer this question, but I do wonder like, what was the fit between what Saban had been running and what DeBoer brought in? Because one thing we noted over and over and over all last season was Kalen DeBoer's won a ton of games.
Yeah.
And he's been an offensive genius. But I wonder if there was and I just don't know the answer, but I wonder if there was just kind of a disconnect between what the guys he inherited and the skill sets and the system they ran and what Kalen DeBoer ran. I don't know the answer, but it just, and again, I think to me, I think the answer is I just didn't see vintage Alabama level dudes dotting that offense the way I had seen in the past.
Yeah, no, and I think there was a disconnect. Because you look at the guys that DeBoer likes, that he had at Washington, that he's recruiting now at Alabama. Some of them are the same type guy that Nick Saban went and got, and that were on the roster last year at Alabama. Some are not, though. He targets a different style of player at times, and so I think there was a bit of a disconnect. It's a new thing. DeBoer likes to do different things offensively than what they were used to, and so I think that was a big part of this year. And I think that happens anytime there's a new coach. Like, he obviously does things different. He's a younger guy. He may have called on some different things that they've done. There was a big difference in what they were doing, and so I think they needed a year to catch up. I think they've got that, and I think we'll see a different product on the field for Alabama this year.
All right, and I know we talked pre-show a little bit about staff changes. You think some stuff might be brewing there?
I think it could. Ryan Grubb was the offensive coordinator at Washington under DeBoer. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but Ryan Grubb recently let go from the Seattle Seahawks after 1 year as their offensive coordinator. He originally was coming to Tuscaloosa with DeBoer. Unofficially was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. I don't think he ever signed a contract or anything, but he was coming to Tuscaloosa when DeBoer took the job. But then ended up being offered by the Seattle Seahawks. Well, he could just not move and stay up in Seattle and work for the Seahawks. Great for him, great for his family, stay up there, whatever. He was let go, and so he is available. Not Nate Oates. I listen to a lot of basketball. Listen to you guys talk about basketball.
That's a little bit of a talk
was asked. Kalen DeBoer was asked this week at Senior Bowl practice, straight up, "Hey, is Ryan Grubb going to come to Tuscaloosa?" And reading between the lines a little bit, he didn't give a straight up answer. He just said, "Look, it's going to take him time to figure out what he wants to do." But DeBoer mentioned a couple times, but I'm here for him. Whenever he needs me, I'm here for him. And he really respects Ryan Grubb. And so I'm not saying he's going to come hire him as the offensive coordinator, but it wouldn't surprise me if Ryan Grubb ends up on staff in Tuscaloosa on some capacity of the offensive staff. And I think that would be a huge addition. He is an excellent offensive coordinator. I think that would be a huge addition for Alabama if they were able to do that.
Chase, let's wrap it up. Let's pick some questions from the chat here that you want to attack. And for full disclosure, I'm much more in basketball and baseball mode right now.
Let's. I'll start with this at the bottom. Donovan here. You think dynasties are now over with how college football works today? I wouldn't say they're over, but it's way more difficult now with the way college football is. You think about dynasties, you think about Alabama, for example, and how Nick Saban just stackpiled 5-star after 5-star in his roster. And so, he was able to maintain success. One guy graduates, well, there's another 5-star steps in his place and things like that. So that was able to help create a dynasty. I would say they're over. It's definitely possible, but and Chris, you can agree or disagree, but it's going to be way harder to have a dynasty in this day and age of college football.
All right, let's back up a minute, Chase Robinson. Let's go back to let's pick a year, 2018. I say, Chase, true or false? Half dozen years from now, you're going to have guys playing 4 stops in 4 years. True or false?
I would have said, I don't believe you.
Okay. I asked 2018 Chase Robinson. Chase Robinson. Are quarterbacks going to, are players going to get paid millions of dollars out in the open half dozen years from now? What do you say?
Probably no.
I say Chase Robinson. We're going to have a 12-team playoff. What do you say?
I probably would have gone under that. I would have said no, they would have been 8 or something. I would have gone 12 probably.
I say Chase Robinson, 2 years from now, we're almost not going to have a football season.
I definitely wouldn't have believed you on that one.
Okay, here's my point. That's 4 or 5 things I just rattled off that none of us would have seen coming. I mean, the news changes from week to week. One week it's collectives are going away. The next week, no, they're not. One week it's things are going to be governed by Title IX. The next day is the change in politics is going to overturn that. I mean, like, I can't even keep up anymore.
Yeah.
With what's going on week to week. But the backdrop is all this stuff has changed, okay? All this stuff has changed. I'm not making any proclamations of how the dynasties are over, right? Because who knows, maybe 5 years from now this settles in and it looks like a whole lot more like what we grew up with 10, 20 years ago, where guys stay in a place, and if they leave, it's after their junior year to go to the NFL. Otherwise, you get a lot of roster continuity. It may look like that with contracts and everything. And look, the NFL is set up for parity. And this is the other end of the conversation. NFL is set up for parity, if anything is. Yeah. People are getting sick of Mahomes and the Chiefs winning everything. And you got some great football teams. You got Baltimore, you got Buffalo, you got, the Eagles on the other side. I mean, but nobody can seem to stop the Chiefs right now. And even in the midst of the biggest thing that's set up for competitive balance, you got a team that's running the table. Let's say 5 years from now, everything looks a lot more like it does. And Kirby Smart goes and signs the stud quarterback who's a generational talent. We don't even know his name yet, but the next guy that everybody's talking about. And he stays 3 years, and they put dudes around him. I'm just not ready to proclaim that a team can't win 2 or 3 in a row the way it could, because I just don't know what the conditions are going to be tomorrow, let alone 5 years from now.
No, that's a very fair point, and definitely something to think about. Yeah, so appreciate that, Donovan. Aaron Moore says the Sooners, OU, biggest wild card in 2025. Look, I think this year's going to look much different than it did this past year. They've gone out and got John Mateer. They've got, Michael Hawkins back there. I think they're going to be pretty set on offense, and I feel like they can't have as bad as luck as they did last year with injuries. That was just nothing went their way, it seemed like, and so I think that'll look. I'm down. I think they could be.
Think about this a minute, okay? A year and change ago, they were said to be more or less fine with Dylan Gabriel leaving because they got Jackson Arnold, who's a top 10 recruit in his class, dual threat dude. He's ready to run the show. He's expecting to do it. So, okay, Dylan Gabriel leaves to Oregon. We're fine with that. Gabriel was the guy that led the last unbeaten in college football.
Yeah.
While you're getting anybody and everybody hurt, you barely made a bowl. And again, I'm not saying this to bag on Oklahoma. It was what it was. Injuries had a big part of that. But here we are in the offseason. Next thing you know, Jackson Arnold's at Auburn, and they've been chasing John Mateer, who was like the quarterback in the portal that a lot of people thought was maybe the best one out there, who didn't really play for a couple of years, I think, if I'm correct. I mean, what a wild sequence that was. I have no idea where it's going with Oklahoma, and I think Aaron's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they very well could be. Yeah. Um, Donovan also adds this about Auburn with their schedule, and they do need to take advantage of this season in this schedule. They got Jackson Arnold at quarterback. They got some good receivers. Eric Singleton out of the portal. This is a very important year, and just to let you folks know, we talked about 3 teams today. We're going to do these live streams probably twice a week, and so we're going to hit on all these teams in the offseason. So we didn't talk about your team today. Don't worry, we will get to them. We will talk about all 16 SEC teams, and so we'll definitely be diving into Auburn soon. But they do need to take advantage of this year. It's a very important year for Hugh Freeze. He's done a good job in the offseason, I think, of recruiting and getting guys in here. Now it's just they've got to be on the same page, and they got to make it happen. They got to get some wins this year, Chris.
We had Bruce Pearl on our show. If you're an Auburn fan, I'm sure you saw it. But one of the points Bruce made was, hey, it took me year 3 before we really started to get this thing turned. I mean, Bruce had a couple of losing seasons, and he used that as an analogy to jump into Hugh Freeze in the spot he'd been in, that he just needs some time. I'm not totally sure I agree, but it's an interesting thought. It might be wrong. I mean, Hugh Freeze sure had a lot of success at Ole Miss. He had it a lot quicker than he had at Auburn. But there was a place that was not exactly in a great place when Brian Harsin was run out of there.
Right. Yeah, it was not in great shape. So they do to take advantage of this year for sure. But thanks everybody for your comments. I know we're gonna get out of here, Chris, but it is always great to talk SEC football, even this time of the year, because there's no off season when it comes to football. There's always things going on, and there's always excitement in the SEC.
Yeah, Chase, it's good to be back. I miss hanging out with you the last couple of weeks, and yeah, we're gonna change things up a little bit, do a little bit more of these kind of things where we live stream and hit some off season topics, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm fired up.
All right. Well, thank you for watching our live stream. We'll post these later on the replay if you want to see them. Again, we're going to try to do 1 or 2 of these a week. Take your comments, take your questions, and I hope you guys like it. We got plenty of football, basketball, baseball stuff. We're knee deep in basketball, and I'm getting there on baseball, doing tons of research behind the scenes. We're talking to coaches, all that. So if you like this, if you like your other content, we want to get our football up to that standard too, and I think we're on our way. Anyway, for Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16. God bless you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon with more SEC football, baseball, and basketball content.